This is Enter the View with Jay Ferrari. Tonight I'm interviewing Dr. and Mrs. George. They are familiar on this campus as professors in the psychology department, the business department, and speech. They wrote a book together, and the book is entitled The Compatibility Code, The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Dating and Marriage. I want to know where you guys got this idea from, and who is it for?
Ooh, so where did we get the idea?
When I was a graduate student at UCLA is when I started working on research in the area of relational success, particularly premarital counseling and factors that influence success in relationships. That was 1992 when I graduated from UCLA, and I've been researching the area ever since. It's when I married Elizabeth in 1999, we began to structure the material so that it could be more accessible and more useful to individuals. How did we do that, Miss Elizabeth?
Well, when I first met him, now y'all know, we met on Match.com. It was only like a year and a half old at the time when we met. And his process had like 13 steps, and we pretty much went through all of them. And at the time, I'm wanting to be able to talk and speak about it, and I discovered that you can't, all my speech students know this, you can't talk about 13 points. So I was looking for 2 or 3 or 4. And one day, I was teaching a class in business on how to staff an organization, and it had 3 steps. So take a look inward of our company, take a look outward, who would be your ideal employee, take a look together, how do we have the interview? And I stopped right in the middle of class. I went, I got it! And so then Darren and I started, we started talking about how to then put it in a format, for a book. So we were looking for that 3-step, I'm going to use the word formula. We weren't using the word code yet.
It took us a very long time to come up with a name. We had individuals recruited to try and come up with names. We ran through probably 150 of them, but we're very pleased with the final name, that is the Compatibility Code. And we were able to mesh this relational material with the business model of the look inward, the look outward, the look together.
Okay. You guys talk a lot about reducing the emotions surrounding relationship decisions. How could people do that and still call it love? How is that possible?
Well, our model up to this point in our culture for the last, Darren, 50 years?
More than that.
More than that?
80 perhaps.
Has been really to emphasize the emotion of love.
Right.
And when we emphasize the emotion of love as the thing that we're going to use to show us whether this man is right for me, yields all sorts of problems. Because did you know there are days that I actually don't like him very well? I'm sorry, was this a new revelation?
No, it wasn't.
But I can choose to love him, but I often, once a marriage starts progressing, you may not feel like you're in love, right? And so if you lose that feeling, and that's how you knew he was right for you, you may go through a period of time where you're scared, where you don't think you've got a solid marriage, and then begin to pick the marriage apart and move toward divorce, right?
And Chanel, I think another point is to distinguish between what is called in love and what is called real love or mature love. The in-love condition, psychologists have been brash enough to actually research this. The in-love condition lasts on average about 2 years. This is a problem. If 2 people meet, they fall in love, they marry a year and a half later, they got 6 months to go. What are they going to do for the next 59 and a half years?
Wow.
And that's the transition into real love, which includes the same intensity of the in-love condition from time to time. There's these sparkling diamonds in the relationship as you weave this fabric or you compose this symphony of your life together. But the reality is you as a human being will go through the entire range of emotions during a lifetime. And whoever you choose to marry will also go through the entire range of emotions during a lifetime. And when you're married, that doesn't mean you're always up here.
Right.
You'll still go through that range, but you do it together. And so you go through the entire fluctuations of emotions, but keeping the emotions alive as a matter of continuing to act in loving ways toward that individual.
So, another way to phrase it, particularly for my gals out there, if I was going to have you go shopping for a new pair of shoes, do you know what shoe size you have?
Yes, I do.
And what size would that be?
9.5.
A 9.5. And so if you are headed out and you're at your favorite store and there is the perfect pair of shoes and they're 7s, are you going to buy them?
No.
What if they were 10s?
Depending.
It depends.
Depending.
Oh,
yes.
so we begin to bend the rules a little bit there. But if clearly they don't fit, you're not going to buy them, and you're certainly not going to fall in love with them, right?
No.
But do you have shoes that are your favorite?
I do.
Okay. And you really like wearing them?
I really do.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that becomes the example. We can pick first based on fit, and then we can fall in love. So what happens is, if we use our heads a little bit on the front end before we meet somebody, we know a little bit more about ourselves, more about who would be a good fit for us. Then, when we do meet and have those conversations, we have more confidence in the love that we feel for them in the long run.
It's also the reality in the same context as in the context, let's say two individuals or a couple are in love with each other, and they're head over heels, and their emotions are in the clouds. Even in that context of being in love, they can step away from the relationship for a moment and consider wisely, is this a relationship which has potential for the future? And the reality is, if you have greater security in the cognitive, in what the brain is saying in terms of we are a good fit and this has long-term potential, you can enjoy the in-love condition even more.
Okay. Another question that I have, and I think a lot of ladies here may have, we're in search for Prince Charming. You know, the mystical Prince Charming and the elusive one. What do you guys have to say about that?
Of course we're looking for Prince Charming, right? I mean, we've been looking for Prince Charming since we were 3 years old. If you go in Walmart, if you go in Toys R Us, and you go on the girl aisle, it's all about pink and fairy tale.
Right.
In fact, they've got now wedding kits where you can, as a little girl, plan your wedding and dress all your little friends up in the bridesmaids' gowns and do all this stuff where it's actually emphasizing that the wedding day is the goal. And that after the wedding, you know, we're just going to get up on that beautiful white horse or in that white Corvette or whatever it is and ride off into the sunset. And so we recognize in our research that not only does this start in the fairy tales of our childhood, but then it continues on in the Hollywood model of two opposite people being attracted to one another and then getting married in spite of all logic saying that this is not a good fit. With the message to every one of you that love will overcome all of our big differences.
The question you might also ask is, you gals are looking for Prince Charming, but would you rather have a Prince Charming for the day on which you get married and then he turns into the ogre, or would you rather have a Prince Charming for the entire 60, 70 years of your marriage?
Right.
The point is, if there's a reasonable fit, what you do is your love will grow richer and deeper over time, and you will love that person more. And so we need to think beyond just the trivial of, is the guy hot? Does he look good? Is that a good person to be standing next to on my wedding day? To saying, let's switch the brain on and say, what's the likelihood of success of this relationship? And if you're reasonably compatible, there's no such thing as perfectly compatible. It does not exist. All people have tensions in a relationship, but reasonably compatible, and you do the right practices through the marriage, what happens, that marriage can grow in richness over the course of your lifetime. As again, I use the same analogy because we love it so much. In fact, we met on this analogy. As you weave the fabric, or you weave the tapestry of your life, or compose the symphony of your life, with the entire richness of the ups and downs and the love that goes with it.
Okay. Would you guys say that you have applied what you've written in your book to your own marriage, your own relationship?
We have no right to talk with anyone if we haven't. I told people before we married, I tell my students when I present this material to my students in class, I'd say, if I marry, it doesn't work out, you're free to shoot me. Well, she's an international caliber shooter, so they don't have to do it. She can do it.
All right. How does the state of one's marriage impact other aspects of one's life, like their career and anything else that may come along the way?
Research is clear that the greatest single factor associated with life satisfaction, life happiness, is the quality of your marriage. Now, there is a second one which is very close to that. They're the two big ones. The other is your accomplishments, your career, and things that you accomplish. And what we like to do is acknowledge that both are very important. The relationships are important, the accomplishments are important. I often hear the comment, no one on their deathbed says they wanted to spend more time in the office. But I'd like to say no one on their deathbed wants to say I was a nice guy, I never did anything. It is possible to have magnificent accomplishments and wonderful relationships. And the point is, if you're well matched, you do both. You accomplish things such as Elizabeth and I do in our marriage. We've written books together, we've played in symphonies together, we have conducted seminars together, many things we have done which are wonderful accomplishments, and yet it encourages the emotional aspect of the relationship, the loving aspect of the relationship as well.
And if I were to take the opposite tack, I want you to think of some of the times when you have struggled the most, let's say studying, let's say things, when you're having the worst trouble focusing, almost always it's due to some type of relationship issues, maybe with a girlfriend, an intimate, your boyfriend, intimate other, a relationship with parents. In fact, a recent study has shown us that of the top 7 reasons for contemplation of suicide across Canada today, the top 7 of first-year students in university, relationships with not only girlfriend, boyfriend, but parents and friends are one of the in the top. And so if you take not just the question of what influence does it have on the positive, the negative can take us all the way to the brink of contemplation of it's not worth it. Yeah.
So summing up, a response to the question, that is, the quality of the relationship is the greatest single factor associated with life satisfaction. And when you have a great relationship, it enables the wonderful, the magnificent accomplishments that you can do together and individually as well.
There are many different books out there on dating and what we should do in marriage and all these different things. I would like to know, what makes yours different from everyone else's? What can we find that's way different?
So let me start on this one.
Sure.
When we first started doing our research, the most important thing when you're beginning to write anything is to know your target market. All of my marketing students say, yes, amen? Yeah, target market. And so we began to look at the literature, and there was a lot of research and work on what do we do with a marriage that's already gone wrong. How do we fit it? How do we fix it? How do we get out of it? How do we repair it? How do we get one or both of us to counseling? How do we feel better about ourselves in spite of a bad marriage? And that research started in the late 60s. It began to enter into premarital counseling. That's when we first began to see counseling as marital counseling as a profession. So then they took the tack of, well, we need to do premarital counseling. And so almost everybody's familiar with the idea that when you're about to get married, the first thing that you've got to do with the pastor is you go in and you have that interview. And maybe it's a one-time session, maybe there's 3 or 4, but it's kind of like on a checklist. The pastor knows he has to do it, and the couple knows they have to do it. But they've already sent out wedding invitations a lot of times. They've already been receiving wedding gifts. The patterns are already chosen. Everything's already done. So we began to look at what of our material, when would be the very ideal time to introduce somebody to this material? And that's what then made it unique. And the ideal time, which makes it the ideal target market, is when somebody has dating experience, but they're not currently dating somebody. Because see, if we're already dating, then we're already going to be holding hands. We're just going to be sharing that body language, and then there's going to be all those biases. And so what we don't want to do is start trying to figure out is this the right person for me when I already have feelings toward them? So our ideal starting point is when they're in between, okay? And so that's what the book targets. Now, our particular book, the one that we already have written, is written for a woman who's been married before, between the ages of, say, 35 and 50, and but recognizing that the code, the three-step code, fits any single individual. It's just what challenges you if you've been married before might be a little bit different list than what challenges you if you haven't been married.
So expanding on that a little bit, as Elizabeth said, the material would apply to anyone.
Oh, okay.
It's just, this has been given examples which would represent, it says the Intelligent Woman's Guide to Dating and Marriage. It's just it has women examples in it, that's all.
Right.
If we
But
had
it could be
intelligent-
applicable for men as well.
Absolutely, because we use the book, I use it in my premarital counseling class. But going back to the original question, what's unique about the book? There have been lots of books written about how to have a successful marriage or get out of one if it's not working well. There are lots of books written about how to attract someone, but there's very few books written about how to think before marriage if it's a good fit or not.
Right.
Neil Clark Warren with eHarmony.com has written some books in this area. And our book is unique in a couple of ways. Number one, it deals with what questions do you ask in order to come up with a good choice in terms of who you want to spend your lifetime with. The other element is, from a researcher viewpoint, is many books out there are just compilations of what other people have done. This is truly unique in some of the ideas that we have, such as the concepts of essence qualities and shared passionate interests and things of this nature. So I would humbly say I think it's the best book on the market in terms of what we're attempting to do with it.
In its niche.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now the floor is open to anyone who may have any questions for the Georges. You could take this time to go ahead.
You guys do? If a girl has low self-esteem, right, and she starts, like, how, I have the question, I'm trying to word it. Okay, if a girl has low self-esteem and she wants to start dating and she wants the relationship to be successful but knows that, like, what,
How about if we rescue you?
Yeah,
Okay?
no, we
So
have good answers to that
this is a
question.
wonderful first question because, again, using the 3 steps, we start with the idea that you need to understand yourself before you can look for the right person. And by understanding yourself, we go through several steps, and one of them is, am I actually dating ready? Can I draw a business parallel?
Sure.
Okay, so if you were wanting to produce a product for Walmart to sell, they're going to have several criteria. One is going to be, can you actually produce enough of that product so that when our clients come in, you can keep it stocked? And are you going to warranty the product so that if it breaks, the client can bring it back and you can replace it? So if we were to consider ourselves the product, that we're going to be putting ourselves out there as dating ready, we want to be healthy, both from the standpoint of that we are who we say we are, the package is right, that we don't have any hidden defects, because when that young man or young woman sees us, talks to us, becomes interested, wants to enter into a longer-term relationship, what happens if there's low self-esteem and it makes us super needy and super clingy and super jealous and well, you just don't love me and you don't spend enough time with me and well, I just must not be worth it, you know.
Expanding on the idea, because the question is a terrific question. Self-esteem is an example. What one would need to do is to do the steps to increase self-esteem. And there are simple steps to do that. I teach in my developmental psychology class. The reality is, Elizabeth has just pointed out, if you date when you have low self-esteem, you'll settle for something much lower than you should. Much poorer, a much poorer fit. You'll probably be, as she suggests, clingy and codependent. And so we say, as far as we have an entire chapter in the book which talks about knowing yourself. The unexamined life is not worth living, a quote from Socrates. And so you do is you identify areas of serious, that may provide serious challenge to a relationship, and we suggest that a wise person will be aware of them and take active steps to deal with them. And so in the case of the example you provide right now, you'd go to someone like me and say, my self-esteem is low, what can I do about it? And I point out the steps you can do to improve that. And therefore, when you feel better about yourself, you're going to be much more successful in your dating or in your relational life.
Yes.
Yes, I was going to ask a question. I remember you saying before, right, you were speaking to us in class, and I think you told us how at first you weren't here all the time. It was a distance between you
Yes.
and your husband.
Yeah.
So there are some individuals who face distance between relationships, right? I know it was difficult at some times. So how did you face those difficulties, and what advice do you think you can give to the individuals who are going through that now, or who will go through it?
So you're talking about physical distance between them, they're
Yeah.
not in the
Right,
same
right,
location, sure. Do you want to?
How are you sure? Like, I mean, like,
We have many pages in our website talking about the issues of a distance relationship. There are millions of them, of course. One of the interesting elements is to identify when sometimes distance can be helpful and when it's lethal. Here's when it's lethal. If you meet someone at summer camp for 2 weeks, you fall in love with the person, they're 3,000 miles away now. What happens is, over the course of time, you're going to develop a picture of that person which is entirely unrealistic. All rich in all the positives with no negatives whatsoever. And that's where it can be an absolute disaster. Now, there are instances where distance can be very helpful. That's if you've been dating for a year and a half, you know each other very well, and you're not sure if this is the right relationship for you. In that case, distance can often be a clarifying thing, in which, aside from the emotion of the interaction that you have, in the distance your mind is able to think a little bit more clearly over time. And what happens, often natural consequences will tell the tale. If in distance you find yourself feeling relieved and starting to notice other people, that's probably telling you something worthwhile. And if you find in distance you are increasingly missing the person, wanting to be with the person, that's probably telling you something as well. So it's in our book we go through 13 steps of the challenges of a distance relationship, and in the website we go into even more detail in terms of the things that you have to be careful about when you're in a distance relationship to make sure that you're not going to be taking trails which are going to end in disaster.
Which brings up a really great point as we begin to wrap this up. On our website, we have available for you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages under the resource tab. So if you go to www.compatibilitycode.com.
Or just type in the compatibility code and you'll get to the website.
Yeah, so compatibilitycode.com. Under the resource tab, whatever subject you're interested in, you can look by subject, chapter, etc., and it's all free. All of our forms are free for download, etc. And we're really excited that in the next month our book is being formatted on Kindle, so it'll be available on Kindle Reader. So that's exciting. And
so you just looked long distance relationship, and we talk a lot in the book itself. We spend a nice little chunk of time talking about some of the challenges of a long distance relationship. And are there some long distance relationships that work out? Of course there are. But if you understand what are the unique challenges, then you can guard against them and be much more likely to have a distance relationship work out than if you fall into all of the negative characteristic patterns that happen in a distance relationship.
All right, thank you very much for spending time with us.
I want to finish by saying I want to thank the opportunity to have been interviewed on your inaugural show. This is exciting. I think it's a great product and opportunity for CUC. I think it's much more dynamic than just merely a written format, but to have such excitement and interest in all the attendees today. Most of you know how to reach us if you have additional questions. Email us, call us. We're still running our Friday night group. We've got about 4 sessions left. So on Friday night at after Vespers, you're welcome to come over to the house. And we look forward to seeing you again and watching the rising success of this station.
Thank you.
Good.